Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Talk Tuesday. We're so happy to be here on this beautiful day. And we're going to, let me just let a few more people in. And we're looking forward to having you join us. Carly Rojas from Bridgeport is here with us as well to share some of her practice and some of her strategies in using the data tool that Ajit shared with us back in February. And then Kari Sullivan is going to share some updates with us all. All right, so let me just let a few more people in.
Do you want to put the next slide up?
Sure. Okay. So welcome. We'd love your feedback here. If you could just put your name, your title, and your role, and then just any ideas for future Talk Tuesdays. The role of this Talk Tuesday is really it's a drop-in opportunity for all of our practitioners who are really supporting the attendance work back out in the field. And our goal is to really help ensure that these are meeting your needs as well and any other type of strategies you'd like. So please drop those ideas into the chat box as well.
All right, well, everyone, do you want to move on to the agenda? Steve, we have a packed schedule today, I think.
So here's our agenda, everyone. So Kari, you want to take over?
Sure, thank you, Steve. Welcome everyone to March, what's today, 22nd Talk Tuesday. So I'm going to do, as Steve said, a little what's new as always at CSDE and Partners. We're going to go over the protocol for examining monthly attendance data. We did it on the community of practice, and we also want to review it here on Talk Tuesday for those who might have missed it, and for those who want to just talk a little bit more about it. There's a lot of information there, and just want to make sure everyone is aware of it. And then we're going to hear from Carly Reyes, who's been from Bridgeport Public Schools, is going to talk about how they are using and have been using this protocol tool since it was first introduced last January. I've started to have this Talk Tuesday featured FAQ, and this week's FAQ, I've had a couple questions about child find and when it's time to have a child find. And Jay Brown's here with me too from our Bureau of Special Ed, who we answered a question for a district this year. We're going to share the question and the answer with everyone, so so we can all learn from these exchanges. And then we'll talk about upcoming attendance and engagement meetings. So next slide, please. So what's new at CSDE and Partners? Next slide. So this is very unusual, as you know. Usually this slide is jam-packed of items from our superintendent's digest. However, not as much as being released as had been. We started this 2 years ago when the pandemic started, and our list was just full. So we have a certification update for those of you who are certified or are working on filling positions for substitute teachers. There's a Teach Rock Partnership Cohort 2. There's an invitation to that. And I'm not sure, I know I shared it on the last Talk Tuesday, but the Connecticut Standards for Remote Learning for grades 9 to 12 were recently released, and there was a video, and I understand it was done really well because it had some examples of what some districts might do. So that link to that video is here, and the slide deck. So if you missed the webinar live, you can watch it here. And then there's guidance from the commissioner regarding Connecticut school districts in enrollment process and practice. We might have gotten out a little bit out of the lines or around our enrollment practices during COVID. And so this is a reminder of that. And so you can get that information with this QR code, or you'll get the link with the PowerPoint slides. We also have a new release from the governor that shows there was an evaluation through our performance office that the summer enrichment grants from last year helped re-engage students. And so we have an agreement with higher ed that we work on to evaluate some of our efforts around COVID. And we are also evaluating LEAP through that same type of effort. So we will be able to show some evidence of the success and impact of our LEAP home visiting model. Any questions about any of these? I do believe there are additional funds coming out this year for 2022 summer enrichment grants. Okay, next slide, please. So I always have this slide. The February data was just posted yesterday, so it's hot, and it's these links will take you to the February data and this QR code. The same links every month will go to the updated data report. So the good news is, I'm really excited to say that we turned the curve, and our February attendance and engagement data went down. It went down a little bit, a better attendance, right? So in a good way, positive. Just a little bit, takes a while to turn that around. We really had a rough time in December and January because of Omicron and all of the issues around Omicron, but we are seeing a difference. And I'm getting the sense from districts that they're starting to feel a difference in the climate and cultures in schools, that they are starting to feel a little more normal, a little less, feeling a little less of the stress. So, so maybe we can start changing the narrative a little bit and look at spring for a good time to go to school for everyone. Next, any questions regarding this data? Okay, next slide, please. This graph, our graph shows us the, I have to pull it up on my slide. This is the new graph with the February data. And so what it compares is the end of, the gray is the end of 2019-20. The navy blue is last year, 2021, the end of last year. And then the orange is where we are in February. Now this looks like we are still high. We're still higher than we were last year. It doesn't show you where we are compared to the months before. We don't have a fall trend report, but you can create that yourself. And when I go through the protocol tool, you'll be able to see how to get that data. And so you'll see that in every one of our groups of students, we have bumped up a little since last year. We're seeing the highest growth rate in students without high needs, which is an interesting concept that we're looking into. So we just encourage you all to continue to look at your students with high needs and their attendance, to break down your data by ILs and multilingual families, and by students with disabilities, where we're seeing some of our highest chronic absence rates, as well as our homeless youth. If you're doing home visits, which many of you are, that's a really good opportunity for you to look for signs for students who may be in unstable housing. So I remind you to have your home visitors looking for that, so that that can be reported to your McKinney-Vento coordinator for more assistance. Our home visitors are our boots on the ground, and there's a lot of information that comes back. They're just amazing people. I love to say a quote I heard one in the district: there's magic in LEAP, and there's magic in home visiting. And so that's how we're connecting with our families. So next slide, please. Okay, so for the protocol tool, I'm just going to go through this rather quickly. I'm going to show you what it looks like, and we'll go from there. So it's 6 pages. I'm going to put the link in the chat. So if you want to, it's a download. So if you want to download the link and open it up, you can do that. Okay. And I see Vernon is doing home visits, and it's amazing. I would love to see future sessions on home visits and how they can be used to enhance the process for attendance. Absolutely. And okay, so next slide, please. So the link is in there, so you're welcome to download the instructions. This is This is just where to find everything. So the link to the protocol tool is in this slide when you get, and I just put it in the chat. Also on this slide are the PowerPoint slides that Ajit Kapala-Krishnan used when he did this presentation at our February Community of Practice. The Community of Practice tends to be for district level attendance leads and for all districts, whereas Talk Tuesday is for school level, just about anyone who wants to come from our alliance districts, our charter schools, and our elite districts. So it's a little bit of a more targeted audience. So the recording is there. So Ajit does a much better job than I do. So you can listen to Ajit present about these, and then the tool is there too. So next,
Harry, let me drop the PDF of this document of this PowerPoint in the chat.
absolutely, that'd be
I'll do
great.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. And so then you'll have these slides right away.
Yeah.
And if you could, any questions? If you know how to raise your hand, were there many people at the COP back in February who saw this presentation? Let's see if we see some hand raising. I was. And great. There we go. We're starting to see some hands raised. Yes. Yeah. So if you think about it, I'd love to have you share if you've been able to use it, or if it's something you're really interested in using. If you have a story to share, just let me know. I know that the department is interested in if people are using it and how they're using it. But so that's why we're going to put a spotlight on Carly from Bridgeport in a few minutes. So thank you for that, everyone. So the next slide, please, Steve. It's going to be kind of hard to see. Yeah, it really is. I wonder if you can zoom in, Steve, a little bit. No,
I can't.
okay. All right. So the protocol for examining monthly data, shoot, that's too bad. I wonder, okay. So what it has is 5 steps. So the first step is understanding the metrics, where it explains the difference between attendance rate and chronic absence. And I'm just going to say this, I'm going to read them because I know there is confusion out there, and we have been looking at chronic absence now. And this is on the right-hand side, page 2. He gives examples also. Of attendance rate is the total number of attendance days divided by the total number of membership days, so the school's attendance rate is the percentage. A little bit better. Is that a little better, guys? Okay, so attendance rate is the percentage of kids who are in school on a given period of time, time measurement. Like a lot of times we're looking at average daily attendance rate. We're looking at what percentage of kids were in school in February versus what percentage of kids, what was the attendance rate on a given in March. So you may compare the two, but in our work, we've been really looking at chronic absence, which is calculated at the student level, where average daily attendance is a school level measure. So at the student level, it helps us get sort of deeper under the into like who are those students who are not coming to school, because it tends to be a group of students, and average daily attendance masks that group of students. So chronic absence are those students who have missed 10% or more of school as of that period in time. So the chronic absence rate in Connecticut right now is around 25%. So 25% of our kids have missed 10% of the school days that they've been enrolled so far this year. So how many days of school have we had so far this year? About 120. And so students who have missed 12 days of school in February are chronically absent. But if those students, so for February, it's about 12 days. So you should be trying to keep kids under 12 days now and under 18 days by the end of the school year, because the school year is 180 days. And to be marked chronically absent for the whole school year, you have to miss 18 days. And so that's why even before the pandemic, we were talking about in May and June, who are those kids who have missed 14 days, right? How can we get them to keep coming to school so they don't miss any more school? And it's not just about getting your data right, but it's also about creating relationships with these students and making sure that they don't go into that spring slump and really miss a lot more days. Any questions about that? I'm going to take my hand down. Lower hand. All right. And so the next slide goes into step 2 and 3, or no, 3 and 4. So what they do, if you could go to the next slide, please, Steve.
Yeah.
What I really want you to know is when you download this report, it's going to link you directly to the latest data for your school and your district. So if you look at on the left-hand side of the screen, if you're looking at the first question is, what is the overall district attendance rate year to date in 2021? And how does that compare to 2021, 20 and 19, 20? And so you link on here, you find your district, and those numbers are right there, and you can put it right in your notes here. And then the second question is, what subgroups of students reflect substantially lower attendance? And so you go to that same spreadsheet and there's tabs. And so you can look at your subgroups of students and see what their attendance is compared to the last 2 years. And then there's also a spreadsheet attendance rate for schools. So the third step on here is what schools reflect substantially lower attendance? So this is a really easy to use tool for school and district attendance teams. It's an exercise that you can take back, download the form, and I know there's some new people in, so if you want to post it in the chat, Steve, that would be great. And then on the right-hand side, among the high-need students, are there particular groups of students who seem to be reflecting poor attendance in 21, 22? And your team can make your notes here. And this is an exercise that can be done on a regular basis with your district attendance teams. Remember, district attendance teams are required in schools and districts with 10% or higher chronic absence rates. So if you're here, it's likely that the state law requires you to have district and school attendance teams meeting on a regular basis. And this is an exercise that would be terrific for those teams. I also encourage you to really look at who is on your team and the roles that they play. For this exercise, you want to make sure you have someone who knows how to finagle an Excel spreadsheet. Do they know how to use filters? Right? So that you can filter out everyone else's data. Do they know how to sort? Can they copy and paste? Can they create charts? So you may want to have someone from your data office on your district attendance team, or just attend on those days when you're going to really focus on your data. And go through these questions. Most states don't have something like this. In fact, we're probably one of the only states that has this level of data at our fingertips on a monthly basis. And a lot of that is thank you to all of you for the work that your district does to provide the data on a monthly basis. And so it continues. There's 6 pages and there's 5 steps. The 5th step, 5, the first 4 steps looks at attendance. So here, this question here is about English learners. And the next question is about students with disabilities and what is the difference by grade level. On these spreadsheets, there are tabs, and one of the tabs is students with disabilities by grade level. So you can really zone in and see where are those students where we need to be putting more interventions and more support. We need to look at these groups of students to find out why is their attendance lower than the rest of the population in the school, the student body. And then step 5, they start to look at how many students are chronically absent, how many are extremely chronically absent, and you can look at them over the last couple of years. And there is an extremely absent column, and it will tell you, I think, the number of extremely absent students, which is defined as missing 25% or more of school. Those are your tier 3 students at this point in time. Those may not necessarily be the students who may respond to a home visitor. They may need a connection with a community-based provider or your school-based health center or mental health services or family counseling, and maybe a home visitor too. But once you start to get to those students who have really high levels of chronic absence, you've got to think strategically about what supports are in the community to help that family. based on the root causes. And then you can also look at what is the attendance rate for in-person days versus remote days. And you'll see that attendance is much better on in-person days. And we can only use remote days when it's related to quarantine, right? Or if they have COVID or if they're isolated. And some districts don't even allow for that. But there is the flexibility in districts to allow students who are affected by COVID to learn remotely. And we're finding that even compared to last year, remote learners are more likely to be absent than they were last year. And some of that makes sense. We had a great discussion on the community practice about remote learners, if it's related to COVID, may very likely be sick than they were, more likely to be sick this year than they were last year, because you could just choose remote last year, whereas this year it has to be COVID related, and kids may actually have symptoms of COVID and be sick. And that is the protocol tool. And so I really encourage you to download it, take a look at it with your team, or just play with it yourself. At the state level, every month when this data comes in, I can tell you I've created trend reports for each of the LEAP districts, so I can watch their trend from the end of last year, September, October, November, December, January, February, and I can see who's going off track. I've looked at all the LEAP districts because that's an intervention, right? That's an intervention that the state has invested in. So I want to monitor my interventions and know that this isn't the only thing that's going to have an impact on attendance, but I want to know who's able to keep, who's keeping on track, even with Omicron, right? And there were many districts who were able to hold it pretty tight during Omicron, but then there were districts who went way off track at Omicron. And so what was happening in that district, and the data isn't a blame you or, you know, we're shaming you. We were like, we need, this is a gift, right? This is information that we can use to plan and design our interventions and our recovery. So I also look at it by grade level. I did a really interesting bar charts or line charts for some of our districts to show them grade level in January compared to grade level at the end of last school year. And it really was eye-opening for schools to see like where things are going off track. At the state level, we can see pretty even bump up during December and January, where it went up about 7 or 8 points in December and January across all grades, except for the high school. It got even a bigger gap. And then kindergarten was a bigger gap. So we saw the same pattern, but just a little worsening at high school and kindergarten during Omicron. So I love data. I'm sorry, I get really excited about it. And I'm really happy to help anyone who needs some help creating tables or analyzing their data. Just let me know. But this is the protocol tool. It's very unique and special. It was developed by Ajit Gopalakrishnan and his staff at the Performance Office. And so at this point, before I turn it over to Carly Reyes, I'll take any questions you might have. Carly, I turn it over to Carly.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carly Reyes. I'm the Director of School Counseling and Parent Partnerships for Bridgeport Public Schools. I'm just going to share a little bit the way that we look at all of our data, and of course, using the protocol tool and the data that's provided from the Connecticut State Department of Education. Next slide. So this is how we've started to analyze all of our data, because we know that data can come in many different forms. And so satellite data is the data that's provided by the Connecticut State Department of Education around attendance. And then we look at the map data, which is a little bit closer to the ground, closer to the individual schools, our survey, our SEL survey data, and then our street data, which I'll show you is a lot of it comes from our home visiting program, because literally those people are on the streets collecting the data from the families, identifying barriers, and then bringing that information back up for us to find bigger and better ways to support our students and families. Next slide. So like Kari said, a few weeks ago, I was in a meeting and she said, make sure you find someone who's good with data. And I love the data, but I was not good at being able to manipulate it in the Excel. So I found somebody in our data department who did a quick Excel 101 for me. And it was really helpful because the data that comes from the state is phenomenal, but being able to really compare it month by month or identify trends or changes in the data, you really need to do some manipulating to the Excel sheets. So just an example of some of the reports that we put together for our district attendance team. We always kind of compare ourselves to how the state is doing overall. And this data is as of January. So I wasn't able to get everything in time as of yesterday for the February data. So we add month to month, and then we compare it to the prior years. And then we also look at ourselves compared to the Connecticut overall averages, chronic absenteeism, as well as attendance rates. Next slide. And then we break it down by school, by grade level, and this data is shared directly with each of the schools so they can really identify specific grade levels within their buildings that we are seeing a change with the attendance rate. And I think the enrollment rate is also interesting data that we can kind of look at and analyze to determine how that impacts attendance, how that, what enrollment changes have been made by specific grade levels, and gain some information from that as well. Next slide. And then as Kari was mentioning, we always want to pay special attention to some of our more higher needs populations of students and understand that the interventions that we're putting into place need to be different based on the unique circumstances and situations of each group of students. And so we are taking a very close look at our students experience homeless, as well as our students with disabilities. Next slide. So this is our students with disabilities compared to prior years, attendance rate and student count for each. And then again, putting it up to the Connecticut totals just to give us a sense of an idea of where we are compared to the state as a whole. Next slide. Internally, we run our own, I cut out the school names on purpose, but so I just want to think that was an error. We have our own internal chronic absenteeism report that comes out daily. I believe actually twice a day. We get one in the morning and then one at the end of the day. And each school gets this percent of chronic absent by school as well, so that we are day by day keeping track of our chronic absenteeism rates for each school and then our average as a district. Next slide. So through this data analysis, we have a district attendance team that meets every other week. We meet with the superintendent, we review all of the data. We have the director of specialized instruction, the director of bilingual education, McKinney Vento, representative from our district. We have high school administrator representatives, elementary and middle school representatives from administrators. We have our someone from data management who attends, our director of nursing attends the meeting. So we make sure that we are covering all the different groups of students so that when we do identify these patterns, we can work collaboratively with those departments to identify the best strategies and interventions to put into place. So we did see we were trending down with a percent of chronically absent students through November, but then like Kari said, we did see an increase from December through January, but really happy to report as of yesterday, when we saw the reports through February, we did have a 3% decrease in our chronic absenteeism rate. So we are back to where we were before Omicron, and hoping that we continue to see that number trending down. 9th, 10th, and 12th, we saw it. We have our highest percentage of chronically absent students, as well as our free and reduced lunch, who are also receiving specialized instruction. With our EL population, our high school EL students have a lower attendance rate. So another group that we're making sure that we are providing specific interventions for. And then our students with disabilities is definitely an area of concern that we are working on a daily basis with our Office of Specialized Instruction supervisors as well as special ed teachers and resource teachers in the buildings to make sure that we are supporting those students, and also using our home visitors specifically for certain populations that we've identified as needing extra support. Next slide, please. So, and, we want to make sure we identified, so this is some of the street data. So, working with the special ed teachers, working with the special ed supervisors to work closely with those families. And when a family is identified that has a student that's receiving specialized instruction, and incorporating those conversations so that we can get some of this street data. And these are some of the things that we've kind of unveiled for students who are receiving specialized instruction, some transportation challenges, some school anxiety, behavioral issues. And then when a student is crisis, the families are choosing to keep them home. And so really working closely to build those relationships with the families, and some of the interventions that we're putting into place to support those students as well. Next slide. So we also implemented, getting more towards the map data, is a panorama survey. And so these were the areas that we use to survey our students. We know that when students feel comfortable and safe in their buildings, when they have strong relationships with their teachers and administrators, that their attendance is going to be better. And so we really wanted to identify which areas of their social emotional learning that we needed to support more. Next slide. So this is just a sample of some of the questions that were asked through our panorama survey. And through this survey, we were able to identify a sense of belonging that the majority of students did not respond favorably when asked questions regarding the sense of belonging in their buildings. Of course, we knew that had a tie to the changes in their routine and their schedule and the remote and virtual learning. But even so, even knowing that, we still understood that this was an area that we needed to be really intentional with helping students to feel that sense of belonging in their buildings. Next slide. Just another example, we can skip through this one. And so with the trends in the high school that we saw with their attendance rates and chronically higher percentages of chronically absenteeism, we wanted to pick specific interventions to support those high school students. So looking at buses, transportation, looking at credit recovery options. We also created a new report where we looked at students who were overage and undercredited and looked at their attendance, because students who are struggling in school are not going to feel motivated to come to school every day. So identifying those students and then offering them more opportunities for credit recovery so that they could feel that sense of that feeling of being able to be successful and that there is a path for them. Creating student success plans. We created student success plans with 80% of our high school students with the school counselors, so that we could really be goal-oriented with those students. And then we've increased our support staff, and we've created a student success team district-wide that works specifically with each school when the student is identified that needs extra supports. So that, because we realized that school counselors needed to be available in the buildings, in the classrooms, providing that tier 1 support. So we wanted to create this additional team to case manage and progress monitor the students that needed the extra help. Next slide. And then elementary and middle, similar, but also being intentional about the interventions for those specific groups of students. Student success plans, we implemented a social emotional learning curriculum in all of the classrooms in our elementary and middle school. And Lynn Stevens, who's on the call right now, it's interesting because we're getting a lot of feedback from teachers as well about the social emotional learning curriculum, because they're just quick 3 to 5 minute videos that the teachers can play for their students, that it provides a lot of opportunities for interaction. And no extra work for preparation for the teacher. And we're hearing a lot of positive feedback from the teachers saying that they are also enjoying the videos. And so unintentionally, but now thankfully, we've created a social emotional learning opportunity for the teachers as well. And so, interesting that we're getting a lot of that feedback. Of course, that the students love it and they're engaged, but also that the teachers are enjoying that opportunity to have a social emotional learning experience in their classrooms. Next slide. We're using Move This World. That's the curriculum that we're using. Oh, thanks, Lynn, you're on top of it. Increasing our community partnerships. We knew that we could not do this work alone. Once we were coming back full in person, we had to increase our community partnerships to support our students and families. So we have our communities in our community partners in our schools, restorative practice facilitators, student support advocates, attendance monitors. We have expanded our partnerships with mentors and home visitors and tutors tremendously in our buildings. And we have found such an amazing impact with them being able to support the work that we're doing in our schools. Next slide. So as Kari mentioned, we are one of the LEAP districts. So Lynn on the call right now, she's coordinating our LEAP efforts. We are in a full-blown attendance awareness campaign here in Bridgeport. We have a community event on Saturday. We have invited all of our LEAP families to come to the community event. We have about 10 community partners coming to set up tables, to meet the families, to share opportunities in our community for them. We're going to be providing them with some stuff to come and take home, and some resources, some detergent and meal kits, and a lot of great resources for them, and to have them come out and spend a little time with us, and again, connect them to more resources within our community. And yes.
Carly, can we pause here? Because Kari has a question.
Sure.
Kari Sullivan.
Sure.
Yep.
Carly, when you mentioned that you are having a community event on Saturday, which is great, and your LEAP families are invited, how do you identify which families become LEAP, become LEAP families for home visits and these types of events?
Sure, of course. So we've been having these community events prior to LEAP, but now with LEAP, we are incorporating them into our events. So any family that has been referred for the home visiting program because of, so they're referred to the SRBI process or MTSS within the school. If they we see that their attendance is, they're marked as chronically absent, then we're going to refer them for a LEAP home visit. Our hope is to be able to expand our home visitors, which we already have. We're up to 22 home visitors in our district, that we can provide, a tier 1, maybe tier 2 home visiting program. Right now, with the number of chronically absent students and the number of home visitors we have, they are referred once they've been identified as chronically absent. And so those families, when the home visitors go out, they're providing them the information to come to our community event. We are also inviting families who school counselors or social workers have identified as needing a little extra support, whether they're struggling with their attendance or with their social emotional learning, or the counselor has been aware that the family is going through some challenges at home. We unfortunately have we've been having an increase in house fires. And so anytime a school counselor or social workers identifies one of those families, they are referred, they are personally invited. Our office calls every single family multiple times, reminds them, and then we hopefully will have close to 200 families coming to the event on Saturday. Next slide. I hope that answered, Kari. And just lastly, our attendance reporting and monitoring. So our district attendance team, our school-based attendance team, we do attendance sways. It's kind of like an attendance newsletter. It's a digital newsletter. And so every month we pack these newsletters with information, resources. They're sent to all of the families in the district, and we can see how many views they've had, so how many people have actually clicked on them and read them. We give mental health resources through these sways as well. We have a monthly school counseling SEL theme. So the SEL themes monthly are embedded into our school counseling curriculum, and monitoring the mental health days and the quarantine present days. Looking at all of these different levels of data to help inform and guide our practices. I think I actually have one more slide. Oh no, goodness, Parent Square. So Parent Square is our form of communication. Just quickly, this is how we can monitor the information that we're sending out to our families. It could be sent out at a school-based level or district level. We can see right away if an email bounces, if a phone call doesn't go through, and then we can follow up with that family to get that information updated. We can see when the family opens the letter, or if they react to it. So they're kind of like in a social media, when you like or dislike a post, a family can appreciate the post. And so looking at that information can help inform us what parents are appreciating that we're sending them, so we can be really intentional about our messaging to families. Next slide. And you can just breeze through this, just some more data that we look at. Parent Square is in over 100 languages. So families can identify the language they want to receive the information and it's translated for them. They can identify if they want to email, text, if they want a phone call, and they can even identify which times of the day they want to receive it. If it's an emergency, like a school is closed or something, it will go through no matter what time it is. But if it's just regular communication, they can determine how they want that information, when they want that information, for them to come through to their phones or email addresses. Next slide. And this one is the last one. So this is our street data. This is what we collect from our families. Lynn and I hold a monthly parent roundtable with the superintendent, and we allow opportunities for families to speak directly to the superintendent, ask questions. He gives them an update, and then we always use this opportunity to collect feedback from them. So, you know, so some of this is the real data. This is some of the responses that families have given us when we've asked them, what can we do to improve student attendance? I love the one at the end. It says, if student misses the bus, send a taxi. And then we ask school counselors, like, speak to your family, speak to the students, tell us what are they identifying as the barriers. And so this is the data that we review at the district level, at the school level, and try to be creative and find ways to not send taxis, but other ways that we can help support these families. Yes, Kari, that's the book that our district is kind of working through right now, and it's a great resource for looking at different levels of data.
Mm-hmm. I've heard you and Lynn speak of it before, and I just bought it. So it's a wonderful way to look at data, and where there's value is really in this data from the street level, from the families, giving us information about what's the barriers to attendance, or what are their needs, and what are they liking. And you don't have to focus on the negative all the time. We can also focus on the positive things about school. So thank you so much, Carly. There was a question from Susan Loria in Stanford, who loved your billboard, and she was wondering if you had a flyer that you created for your event that you could share with them.
Sure. Lynn can share the flyer. And also I just want to mention that billboard it rotates in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Wow. So we want to make sure that all families are able to access what we're sending them. And the same thing with our SWAY. Our languages are Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. Those have been identified as the languages that our families speak the most here in Bridgeport. And so Lynn and I work extra hard to make sure that everything we send or post, families can access it, they can understand it, and they can feel welcomed to be engaged in these experiences.
Carly, can I just pop in and one thing about the billboards? And that is that, you know, when we initially started the billboards, it was really to reach out to those chronically absent students and families. And what we're learning on the backside is that now schools are really becoming engaged and wanting to have attendance campaigns so they can get their pictures up on the billboard. So it was, I'd like to say that we did that on purpose. We didn't, except it's really been a nice outcome to see it happen from the school level up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great work, Bridgeport. Wonderful. And Bridgeport's getting some national recognition. Carly presented with Hetty Chang last week or the week before on a national U.S. Department of Education website with the Student Engagement and Attendance Center out of DC. Thank you, Carly and Lynn, for all of your hard work. Really great job. So any other questions? So we have our FAQ, I think is what is the next thing, if you want to put that up, Steve. And it gets a little complicated as maybe just because I'm not a special ed guru, but I've been trying to incorporate a Future Talk Tuesday FAQ. So next slide, please. All right, so the question came from one of our district and they said, in our attendance protocol, we hold a child find PPT for students when they reach 15 unexcused absences. However, there are many students that either we do not have enough data to make any determination or students that do not have any academic concerns. If in these cases, does a PPT need to be held? And so we have a response to that question here. It's 2 slides that I don't know, Jay, if you want to go over the response or if you'd like me to, and you can chime in.
I'm very comfortable if you'd like to do it, Kari, and then if there's any questions about it, I'm more than happy to add whatever I can.
Okay, all right. So just for background, child find falls under federal regulations under IDEA, but Connecticut further specifies in our state regulation, and the regulation citation is here and is discussed as a prompt referral to a PPT. The specific language is the regulation requires a prompt referral to a planning and placement team of all children who have been suspended repeatedly or whose behavior, attendance, including truant behavior or progress in school is considered unsatisfactory or at a marginal level of acceptance. So therefore, a district is required to refer all students to a PPT who meet any one or more of the criteria. So if they've been suspended repeatedly, if their behavior is considered unsatisfactory or at a marginal level of acceptance, if their attendance, including truant behavior, and truancy is 4 unexcused absences in a month or 10 unexcused absences in a year, or just repeated unexcused absences as well. Is considered unsatisfactory at a marginal level of acceptance, or if their progress in school is considered unsatisfactory or at a marginal level of attendance. So they don't have to meet all of this criteria, they have to meet one or more. And there is no provision in the law that allows a district not to make a referral as long as the students meet one or more of the criteria above. That's the basic. And then next slide, please, Steve.
Yep.
To get into a little bit deeper. Well, a district may have made a general rule, like we're going to say in our protocol, 15 unexcused absences is the threshold for referral related to attendance. Special education is highly individualized. So setting the same criteria for all students may not be equitable when considering students individually. Absences will most likely have different impact on different students. For that reason, rather than the state regulating a specific number of absences as the threshold for referral, the regulation purposely requires that each student's absences be reviewed to determine if they may be considered unsatisfactory or at marginal level of acceptance for that individual student. It's also just suggested that all absences, not just unexcused absences, be considered because they have an impact on a student's ability to advance appropriately in general education curriculum. So every absence is a lost opportunity for learning, regardless of the reason for the absence, and the student still misses instruction during any type of absence. When it comes to attendance, it is advised that rather than using a specific number of absences as a threshold for referral to a PPT, districts develop a method for reviewing any student's absences to determine if they are considered to be unsatisfactory or at marginal level of acceptance. And the phrase unsatisfactory at a marginal level of acceptance is left undefined, so the individual nature of each student's absences can be considered. What may be considered unsatisfactory or at a marginal level of acceptance for one student may not for another. Districts make this determination on an individualized basis. So
You did a great job.
thank you, Jay. I just have a question because I understand, we need to be reviewing the data for all these students, but this wouldn't necessarily be a task for an attendance team, right? Because at an attendance team, we want to be looking at the tiers of intervention, and when are there data teams that would look at this, or who in a school might be doing this?
Are you asking me, Carly?
Yeah, I'm asking you, or maybe Carly's. I see Carly, because attendance teams can get bogged down with tier 3 students and looking at individualized students instead of looking at those, like what the protocol showed. Look at the grades, look at the subgroups, look at, different groups of students to determine interventions and causes. But where do we get into the individualized review?
With something like this, when you're talking about attendance, the great thing is that the student will have so many touch points of individual staff throughout a day in their school. And every one of those staff are going to be cognizant of whether or not this child is showing up or not, whether or not their attendance seems to be going in the wrong direction, et cetera. So everybody kind of has an opportunity, but maybe not, they might not be aware of this regulation. So this regulation has to be out there. People need to understand that there has to be a prompt referral if you start looking at whether or not it's unsatisfactory or at the marginal level. Another key team, like those are all individual folks, but another key team is that every time a PPT meets, there really should be conversation around attendance. Even if it's a 30-second conversation because the child's attendance is spectacular, there should be a conversation that sets that out, that the child is doing fine attendance-wise and there's no need for an intervention. But that's a great way at a PPT meeting to identify and look at the attendance data to know whether or not something needs to be done.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that from your experience in your school or district?
Jay, I just wanted to add, that's an important, as we roll out the IEP quality training for all of our districts across the state, the attendance data for our students with disabilities is a key data point to include in the present levels of performance pages.
Exactly.
There's a
Great
question
point.
in the chat from Rachel Allison at the Bridge. What should we do if a parent says they do not want a PPT meeting for the child, even if the child meets one or more of these criteria?
Well, you have to do the referral. There's
Right.
nothing in the law that says that there's any reasons that say you don't refer. Now, in a situation like that, and multiple situations might have a parent refusing services, et cetera, but it doesn't stop the referral. It may stop that you don't get consent to identify the student and provide services. And so that's a whole different story. But even if the parent doesn't want them referred, the law says, and that's the way to explain it to the parent, the law says that you have to make the referral. So there's really not a choice.
And then there's an opportunity for the parent to opt out after the referral is made.
Well, what ends up happening is the referral has to be made. The parent and chances are the folks will come together and identify that they want to do an evaluation. The parent has to either give consent for or not give consent for evaluation. If they don't give consent for the evaluation, they're basically stopping the process at that point. And, it gets well documented on the IEP and, it doesn't move forward. Or they might get through the whole process and decide, to do the evaluations, the child's identified, here's the services we'd like to give. But the parent says, no, I really don't want to consent for special ed services. And if at that point they don't consent, then the process stops at that point. But it should all be documented well on the IEP.
Rachel, is that helpful? Does that answer your question? Okay,
Yes, thank you.
you're welcome.
Super.
Excellent, thank
Yes,
you.
it's part of our child find process.
It's for a child find, that's right. So I'm going to try and do Talk Tuesday FAQs every Talk Tuesday. So if you have any questions, let me know and we can bring it to the Talk Tuesday FAQ. I start to see trends in questions, and this was a trend that that I have been seeing. So I wanted to bring it to everyone because I figured if somebody has it, others might have it as well. I did not update this slide. You're not seeing things. I was racing to finish up my protocol slides. So our next Talk Tuesday is on April 5th. And then the one after that is April 21st. And, oh no, wait. April, I think April 21st is, hold on. And we have a community of practice on, let's see, April 20. Okay, so our next Talk Tuesday is April 5th and the community of practice is April 21st.
And we realize that that's probably a vacation week for many of our participants, but as we always have these recorded and updated for you on the website.
And if anybody has talked to me recently, I'm really concerned about 8th graders transitioning into 9th grade. When I look at our 9th grade attendance right now, it's pretty poor. And well, you know, it's a outlier, I should say, right? And so I'm concerned about what are we going to do for transition for 8th graders to 9th graders, not just over that summer, which a lot of us have summer bridges, but how are you going to set up an early warning system and mentors or to receive these students who may have had poor attendance in August? And so I'm going to be reaching out if anyone has had any experience with a successful transition intervention or prevention program for 8th grade going into 9th, and for 9th graders maintaining good attendance. Please let me know so we can highlight it. And I'm also interested in if you did do some bridge activities or interventions over the summer last year, did you evaluate it? Did you look at the students who participated to see if what their attendance looked like over the last several months, over the fall? Did that have an impact? I would imagine that it might have some impact, but it's not going to last for very long. Like if they have a great bridge experience, then they go to school and there's not a great experience, and their attendance might drop off again. So, so we need to think of this as a continuum for these students, and hoping to have either a COP or a webinar, a panel of folks to talk about how do we welcome and receive our 9th graders. I went to a lot of middle of year meetings, and I thank all of you who are here because they were fantastic. But one of our districts said we hug our kids all the way through, and so even the high school students, and I just love that. Hi, Jeannie.
Hi. So for what we put in, our district put in what we call it our rising 9th graders.
Yeah.
And what we did is that we followed the 8th graders. We worked with the 9th graders all through the whole entire 8th grade and then into 9th grade. And then we follow them all the way into high school. But those 8th graders, we work with them in 8th grade into 9th grade, and we work with them in the summer. So they attended summer school, and we had an amazing program for them. And then if you see for our district, our 9th grader wasn't our highest for New Haven. So it did work. And
Yes.
This year we're doing it again. So any little bit works. So, but then we're gonna keep on following those same students throughout the years. So those rising 9th graders, we do work with them directly in starting in 8th grade. So that's how New Haven does it.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'll put that down and we'll be in touch. So, all right, folks, any other questions? As Steve says in the chat, don't hesitate to email us and with ideas for future topics on Talk Tuesday or regarding 8th grade transition, rising 9th graders. Would love to talk to you. So have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
And thank you, Carly, for being with us today. You're terrific. We
Yes,
appreciate
Carly,
it.
how do I? I'll stay on for another minute or two if that's okay with you, Steve. If anybody has
Yep.
any other questions, we'll do some after hours kind of thing.
Yes, Carrie, I have one question for you.
Sure. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Oh, okay. So I have a question, and this has been coming up in all my attendance meeting. I've been attending, going to all